Welcome back. My name is Guy, and this is the second edition of Hand or Power. First, I'd like to thank everybody who commented and made suggestions on the first video. We're very happy with what we got. Mitch and I took a look at all the different suggestions that we got, and James came up with a very good one, which was a wedged through mortise and tenon, or a through wedged mortise and tenon, whatever you want to call it. And it's a joint that you don't see a lot, but it's very, very strong, and I'm going to show you how to make one. Well, I started out first by laying out for the tenon. And the layout for the tenon is the way you lay out any other tenon. So I've got a 3/8 inch wide tenon. The cheeks on here are 3/16. These are 1/4 of an inch. And the overall length of this tenon is going to be 2 3/16 of an inch. Now this is the layout for the rail that it's going to go through. Again, this is going to be a through mortise, so it's going to go all the way through the other side. But you notice two sets of marks for the length. Now the shorter set of marks on the inside here actually represents what the length of that tenon is. And that's how I'm going to cut the mortise. I'm going to cut that all the way through on that first set of marks. What the second set of marks is after I create that through mortise, I'm going to take a chisel. I know this is the power tool method, but I've still got to use some hand tools here and there. You can't get away from it. I'm going to take a chisel and actually create angles inside of this. And what's going to happen is after I create the tenon, I'm going to put two grooves in here. I shouldn't say grooves, I'm actually going to cut slots in the end of the tenon. And when I put this in through here and drive wedges in, it's going to expand this and actually make almost a dovetail inside the through mortise. Let's start first by cutting the mortise, and then we'll go from there. Well, I'm going to use my mortising machine to do this. If you don't have a mortising machine, you can take a drill press, drill out the bulk of this, and then hit it with the chisel. But I'm going to use the mortise machine. Like I said before, I'm going to cut the mortises and just on these inside lines first. Well, here's the finished mortise. As you can see, like I said, I cut to the inside set of lines, which is at 2 3/16 of an inch. And it is a through mortise, so it goes all the way through. The next thing I need to do is I need to make a tenon to fit into this. I'm going to use my tenoning jig to cut the cheeks of the tenon. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can make your own tenoning jig. You don't have to buy one. You can use a dado stack if you have one. You can use a router table. You can use a bandsaw, or God forbid you could use a handsaw. I've got this tenoning jig. I'm going to use it. Well, I got lucky on the second pass, and I've got a nice snug fit. These have to be snug on the sides. Remember, because when this goes all the way through, you're going to see the top of that coming through on this other side. So if there's any gaps, they're going to be very, very noticeable on either side of that tenon. So now I just need to mark and cut the ears of this tenon off, I guess. Here's a finished tenon, and when I put it on here, it is nice and tight, which is what I want. Most of the strength of this joint is going to come from the wedges, which is a mechanical thing. It's a little bit proud of the top, which is good. A little tiny gap there, but that's all right. I've also got a nice, tight, clean corner right here. So that turned out very well. Take this off of here. Next thing I need to do, I need to put this back in my vise. I'm just going to take my ruler here. I'm just going to go to the edge of that. Move that back. And I'm just going to mark my marking knife, 1/16 of an inch. Just make a little dimple. I'm going to do the same thing over here with this. This doesn't have to be perfect, but close is good. And then I just need to take that mark and make a line right where I need to start cutting with the chisel. Now I've got that marked, I just want to roll my chisel a little bit and square those to those lines. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making little ramps on both sides of this, or the negative side of a dovetail. Fortunately, I do not have a 3/8 inch chisel, which would have been really handy. So I'm just going to take this, go close to the line, pare down a little bit. And then I'm going to put it right in the line. I'm going to chop down. Go about halfway down. And what I'm trying to do is angle towards the bottom of that mortise. Now that I've got those started, I'll turn it vertical here. Put that in my vise this way. So now I've got that started. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to pare. Again, I wish I had a 3/8 inch chisel, but I don't, so this one will work fine. What I'm trying to do is just angle towards the other side there. Well, I've got the wedges of the mortise cut out. I'm just going to put this back on the tenon. And that's the fit I'm looking for. I've got about a 1/16 of an inch or so on either side of that tenon. So what I need to do now is I'm going to cut some relief cuts in the actual tongue of the tenon itself. I'm getting ready to mark out for those relief cuts in the tongue of this. So I've got a 1/4 inch gauge bar. I'm just going to mark those. I like to use about a 1/4 of an inch. It just makes this a little bit more flexible without being a little too flimsy. And I'm going to cut those down to about, I don't know, about 3/16 of an inch or so from the end. And I'll just do that over on the bandsaw. I'm getting ready to make a quick jig to cut these wedges, and it doesn't take a lot of complicated math or angles or anything else. So I've got about 1 1/4 inches there, and I knew these have to be 3/16 of an inch at its widest point. So I'm going to go like that and measure down 1 1/4 inches. And then I'm just going to connect those lines. And I just need to go over to the bandsaw. I'm going to cut this out, and that'll give me the template for my wedge right there. So I've got this notch cut out. I've got some 3/8 inch stock. Now this is some nice straight grain material, and of course, since the wedge is being driven down this way, we want the grain running this way too. It's pretty important, pretty obvious, but pretty important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm just going to fit it into there, and I'm just going to cut a couple wedges. I'm getting ready to glue this up. I don't want to put a lot of glue on. Remember, this is very tight. And once I start putting glue on this, it's going to swell that up quite a bit. But I do want to make sure I get good coverage, but just very thin. I'm only going to put glue on the tenon itself. Alright. Put some glue on the wedges. And just start pounding them in. Now you have to make sure that first of all this is seated fully on the shoulders, and then tap them in pretty equally, otherwise it'll throw the joint off. Difference in sound there when I bottomed out. I like to use a steel hammer for this instead of a mallet. I can hear it much better that way. So after a couple minutes with the sanding block, this is nice and flush here. This is all nice and tight around here. All my joints here, my shoulders are nice and tight to the rail. Very easy joint to make if you follow the steps, and there's not a lot of rocket science to it, but very, very strong joint, and I hope you give it a try sometime. Well, I hope you enjoyed this demonstration on how to make a wedge through mortise and tenon. Very easy, very strong joint to make. I'm going to leave a link over here to Mitch's video. He's going to show you how to do it using exclusively hand tools. I know I use a few hand tools, but for the most part I use power tools. We're going to follow this up again with a conversation about the pros and cons of each method. And again, thanks for watching. And if you have any comments or suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comment section below or use the hashtag #HanderPower on Twitter. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.